Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at theDove.us. Well, welcome back, and what a delight to have back with us today, and an honor to have Paul Batura with us. He's the Vice President of Communication for Focus on the Family, and we've had a great relationship and partnership with Focus on the Family over 30 years now, and they do a terrific work for families across the country and around the world. And we want to deal with the situation when a woman isn't a mom on Mother's Day and dealing with the subject, perhaps coping with infertility. And Paul, good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Perry. It's great to be back with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You guys do terrific work. Thanks for all that you do there.
Oh, well, thank you.
This is a very sensitive topic. How are you guys handling this at Focus?
You know, we received all types of questions and comments, and a lot of heart gets poured into this subject. And so we are regularly dealing with this. It's not just around Mother's Day. Obviously, infertility is a 12-month a year problem. And so we just have great counselors on hand to talk moms to be through, and expectant moms who just can't get pregnant. But we deal with this regularly and try and deal with it empathetically and lovingly, and have been doing it really for the last 35 years.
Wow. What advice can you tell the husband to help his wife through Mother's Day when this is the kind of on everybody's mind?
Sure. Yeah, it's very difficult. I've been in those shoes. My wife and I experienced years and years of infertility. And so I'm acutely aware of what it feels like to go to church on Mother's Day and the pastor asks all the moms to stand up, and here's your wife who so wants and so desperately wants to be a mom, and she's sitting next to you, and then or the ushers give out a flower to all the moms on the way out. The best advice is to be as empathetic as is humanly possible as a husband. Men tend to look at things through kind of divide and conquer. Our wives aren't pregnant, so we want to solve the problem for them, and we want to kind of talk it through, when a lot of times our wives just want us to listen and to empathize and to understand. We don't have all the answers, and that's probably the very first most important thing, is to listen more than you talk, and to try and empathize with where your wife is, and probably where you are too, although I think a woman probably processes it and deals with it very differently. Boy, so many questions here.
What do we say to other family members and supporting friends that know that this is an issue, especially going into Mother's Day?
Yeah, that's a sensitive topic. I mean, every family is going to deal with it a little differently, but probably, it's a good idea to kind of get out ahead of the problem if you can. And what a woman doesn't want to hear, and this is a bit stereotypical, but I can say it's from my experiences with my wife and other people that I know. A wife doesn't want to hear, or a woman doesn't want to hear, just relax, it'll happen. Just don't worry about it. When that's first and foremost, right at the top of their mind, they are worrying about it. Now, should they be worrying about it? God is sovereign, God has a plan, sure, but you have to deal with the reality of where you're at. And so it's always good to prepare grandparents, to prepare relatives. If you feel open and if they are aware of the situation, it's good to let them know where you're at, because a lot of relatives are very well-meaning, and even parents may be chastising their kids. Why aren't we really want grandkids? And well, they want kids too, but for all kinds of reasons, it hasn't yet happened. So it's good to communicate ahead of time and to be sensitive to the situation.
You and I, Paul, need to get together and write a book, The 1,001 Stupid Things That Christians Say. How's that?
Is that all? Only 1,001? Yeah.
The other part of this is your faith. Were you thinking that, well, maybe God doesn't want us to have children, or we need God to intervene so that we can have children? How did you process that?
kinds of things go through your mind. They're not all rational. They're not all theologically accurate or correct. But I think one of the questions that has to hit an infertile couple is not why is this happening to me, but what is God up to in the midst of this situation? And that may sound like a lofty question to ask when you're in the midst of your pain, but in reality, it's probably the best question you can ask, because things befall all kinds of people. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. And I can tell you now, looking back with the vantage of the present, I can see exactly what the Lord was doing through our infertility. Because we weren't able to conceive biological children, we were then open to the possibility and the option of adoption. And we were able to have brought now 3 little boys into our home. And I look at those guys every day and I think to myself, if we had had our prayers answered, these boys wouldn't be in our lives. And that's how the Lord works sometimes. He throws hurdles in your way because he wants you to go in another direction. And I think if you can take that perspective in the midst of it, you may not fully understand it. You almost never do. And sometimes you go your whole life and you don't even understand what God's up to. But probably one of the most meaningful things I heard said about this subject was from Dr. Tim Keller out of Redeemer Presbyterian in New York. He wasn't speaking about infertility, but he was speaking about the plight of unanswered prayers, or at least seemingly unanswered prayers. He said, Perry, that sometimes when God is most quiet, that's when he's working the most, behind the scenes. And that was something I held on to and my wife held on to. And fortunately, we were able to get through it.
How long did it take you to process that?
A couple of years, to be honest with you. I mean, because in the moment, there's a lot of tears and there's a lot of disappointment and there's a lot of unfulfilled expectations and dreams that you think will never come true. But it's only in the living of the days and getting through it that you begin to fully appreciate it.
A couple of other aspects, and I want to come back to the adoption one, but first, what would you say to those who didn't have a good relationship with their mother, and yet we celebrate mothers? How do we kind of bridge that problem?
Well, that's a difficult one. Of course, if your mom is still living, my advice would be to do what you can to honor her. If you're not on speaking terms, work hard. If you're not on even those terms, pray for her, pray for your relationship. Life is short. In the blink of an eye, a child grows up and is on their way, and eternity is a long time. And so it's always good to step back from the immediate problem that you're in and to show some empathy, show some grace if your mom maybe let you down or you let your mom down. I think a mom is always open to hearing the voice of her child, no matter how old they are, and give her the credit that she really does want to hear from you. And even if it's not perfect, don't let perfect become the enemy of good. Just keep the lines of communication open.
Good advice. Thank you, Paul, for that. The other thing is that you and your wife finally were led to adoption, the option of adoption. And it is a huge need and opportunity in the world. Give us some highlights on that and how you process that.
Sure. Adoption is a wonderful option, as you said, Perry. We were fortunate that we were able to adopt domestically, simply from a friend of a friend. And that's another important point here. If you're struggling with infertility, it's a very private, very personal struggle. I understand that. I get it. I mean, we know exactly where you're coming from if you're out there and going through this. But there is huge advantage to letting other people know about where you're at. One, they can pray specifically for you, and obviously we believe strongly in the power of intercessory prayer. The second is that people know people, and adoption, it sounds in some ways cruel or crude, but adoption is a difficult process, and it's almost competitive in nature, that there are only so many available children, so many infants, and there's a lot of people who would love to adopt infant children. And so if you let people know where you're at, you have the opportunity of getting connected. And that's what happened with us. We were able to meet and develop a relationship with the first birth mom that we met, and we have a wonderful relationship with her now. But it's important, again, to let people know what your desires are and to pray about that, and they'll pray about it. And but adoption, there's so many needy children out there. The infants may be a tough thing, but there's 100,000 foster children who are just waiting for forever homes. And you might be at a stage in your life where that would work better for you. And that's a great option. And it's a very, very wonderful mission field. Not for everybody, and it's certainly a difficult challenge, but it's one that the Lord will be with you if you decide to go for it.
It can be a little ominous. I think people sometimes can be scared by it, by the stories that we hear, how long it takes, how much it costs, whether it's domestically or with children out of the country. I've never heard anybody that was disappointed at the end, but it was pretty difficult getting to that point.
It's all ominous. You're absolutely right. It's expensive. It's not as expensive as you might think. I often tell people that when you consider that the government offers a adoption tax credit, which is over $13,000, that's not a deduction. It's an actual credit. So you get back that money that you put into it. So it makes it a little more affordable depending upon what option you're going for. I was tremendously intimidated by the prospect of having an open adoption. And by open adoption, what that is, you are in relationship with the birth parent. Could be the birth mother and birth father. In our situation, it's just the birth mother. That was difficult for me because I wasn't exactly sure how that would go. But we have a wonderful relationship with her, and she's become a member of our family, and we're a member of her family. And again, if you leave your hands open to what the Lord could do with it, and to take a risk, don't necessarily take care, you can go and step into it with the faith that the Lord is with you, and He'll do things that you never could do on your own.
What a story, Paul. Back to the church. You said a couple things there earlier that were pretty interesting, and yet I don't know if we think these things through. All right, so we're going to go to church Sunday, and the moms are recognized, and they get the flowers. You got any advice for church leaders on that one? I mean, is there anything else we can do so it doesn't seem to be so painful for those who can't participate?
Far be it from me to necessarily tell a pastor how to run his church or to structure how he handles Mother's Day. But I'll tell you what, if I were a pastor and I had the opportunity to acknowledge mothers, there's two sides, Perry. There are people who say, well, you should just ignore it because you don't want to hurt people. That's a bit like don't talk about marriage because you don't want to offend those who have experienced divorce. That's not a good thing because marriage is a God-ordained institution. It's wonderful. We should celebrate it. The same thing with motherhood. Motherhood is a wonderful thing. It should be celebrated. It should be acknowledged. What I would do if I were a pastor would be to acknowledge all the mothers and the mothers-to-be and those who want to someday be a mother. That would be a better way of encompassing the spectrum of women who are in the church. You can mention the fact that there are moms here or women here who are not yet moms, who might be struggling. Simply acknowledging that the problem exists goes a long way in soothing the hurt. It's a bit like a bomb on a burn. It doesn't cure it, but it is helpful because you realize somebody understands it. My wife has lamented some of the things people say, and you have to just realize that there are people around you who are in all different stages of life and on the journey, and just to be sensitive to that, to realize that the world is bigger than your world, and that everyone was carrying a burden of some sort, and that would be my advice to a pastor.
Wow, that's beautifully said. Thank you, Paul. Hey, the few moments we have left, give us an update at Focus. I would imagine your guys' phone is ringing as much as ours. The crazier the world gets, more calls are generated. What's happening at Focus these days?
You're right, Barry. We just got back from Washington, D.C., where we were at the Supreme Court hearing on marriage. And that is an ominous decision that we're awaiting the outcome of. What will the court hold? We don't know. We do know that marriage is the union of a man and a woman, and that That's God's definition, and that's what we support. We hear from all kinds of families who are under tremendous pressure and struggle, and we have the National Institute of Marriage, which I think I've mentioned before, that's based out of Branson, Missouri. If your marriage is on the ropes, if you're struggling and you need something to turn the tide, this marriage seminar will go a long way in helping to resurrect, to redeem the struggles that you might be having in your relationship. So we would love to hear from you if you're in that position.
Anything else you guys are working on in the future? I know you've had some films, and that's been very successful. What's coming down the pike?
We have another film coming out next year about dating. It's talking about the culture of courtship, which is sadly, in some ways, it's non-existent. You know, where when we were kids, you know, dating was something we did, and we obviously did it with the intent to find a spouse. And nowadays, that's becoming kind of a thing of the past. And so, this film is a documentary challenging young people to deliberately court their significant other, and to think of family in terms of, you know, marriage and forming a family, and treating dating seriously, and not just having this hookup culture, which has become so prevalent and candidly very damaging to society.
Wow, that's terrific. Paul, you and Jim Daly and the whole team, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, but what if the Supreme Court redefines marriage? What are we in for as a family of believers? What do you think we're going to be faced with?
Yeah, I think, Perry, that is a big decision that we're awaiting, and I think what is being decided is more than just the definition of marriage, because there are consequences to a decision that establishes that there is a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. I think we're seeing it a lot in the religious liberty sphere. That's what we're really concerned about, because people often ask the question, well, what does a same-sex marriage do for my marriage? You know, I'm a heterosexual, I'm happily married. That same-sex marriage doesn't affect me at all. And in reality, it does affect you. It affects how you're able to exercise your freedom of conscience and of your freedom to express and live your faith. We've seen it in the real life stories of a baker who doesn't want to participate in a same-sex ceremony and decides they don't want to bake a cake for that ceremony. That baker gets fined lots of money. The florist in Washington is fined over $150,000 because she won't prepare flowers for a same-sex ceremony. These are individuals who are engaged in free enterprise, who are simply trying to balance their faith with their work. And if it is a constitutional right, then therefore not serving someone is a significant blow. And so that's what we're concerned about. We're concerned about pastors being forced to conduct same-sex ceremonies. 10 years ago, no one would say it never happened. But it's a very strong likelihood if it goes the wrong way.
Well, Paul, thank you. And to all of the team there at Focus on the Family, thank you. We cherish greatly the partnership we've had with you folks and have had through the years. Keep up the good work, and look forward to having you back soon, my friend.
Thanks, Barry. You as well.
All right, good to see you. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.